Farvardin Yast, verse 74. We worship the perception, we worship the intellect, we worship the conscience, we worship those of the Sirozahs. We worship the souls, those of the tame animals, those of the wild animals, those of animals that live in the waters, those of the animals that live under the ground, those of the flying ones, those of the running ones, those of the grazing ones. We worship their Farvardin. And so it's kind of obvious here, they're not taking all these things as gods, they're remembering them, they're holding them inviolable, perhaps. 75. We worship the Farvardin. We worship them, the liberal. We worship them, the valiant. We worship them, the most valiant. We worship them, the beneficent. We worship them, the most beneficent. We worship them, the powerful. We worship them, the most strong. We worship them, the light. We worship them, the most light. We worship them, the effective. We worship them, the most effective. And worship possibly means respect or bring to mind, or hold a remembrance of. 76. They are the most effective amongst the creatures of the two spirits. They are the good, strong, beneficent Farvardin of the faithful, who stood holding fast when the two spirits created the world, the good spirit and the evil one. You know, Ingra in you and met to spend. 45. Okay. 77. When Engra Ma'inu broke into the creation of the good holiness, then came in across Mohu, Mano, and Attar. 78. They destroyed the malice of the fiend Engra Ma'inu, so that the waters did not stop flowing, nor did the plants stop growing, but at once the most beneficent waters of the Creator and Ruler Ahura Mazda flowed forward, and its plants went on growing. 79. We worship all the waters, we worship all the plants, we worship all the good, strong, beneficent Farvardin of the faithful. We worship the waters by their names, we worship the plants by their names, we worship the good, strong, beneficent Farvardin of the faithful by their names. 80. Of all those ancient Farvardin, we worship the Farvardin of Ahura Mazda, who is the greatest, the best, the fairest, the most solid, the wisest, and the finest in body, and supreme in holiness. 81. Whose soul is the Matra Spenta, who is white, shining, seen afar. We worship the beautiful forms, the active forms, wherewith he clothes the Amesha Spenta. So we worship the swift-horsed sun. And we can think of this in, like, monotheist terms as, you know, the Farvardin is like the qualities, the actions and stuff by which, the names, which is stuff by which one was known. But the essence of God is, you know. But remember, like the da'ana of the person in the grave, the personification of their system of judgment comes and meets them. This is another side of that, you could say. Part 23 compromises verse 82 to 84. We worship the good, strong, beneficent Farvardin of the Amesha Spentas, the bright ones, whose looks perform what they wish, the tall, quickly coming to do, strong and lordly, who are undecaying and holy, who are the seven of one thought, who are the seven of one speech, who are the seven of one deed, whose thought is the same, whose speech is the same, whose deed is the same, whose father and commander is the same, namely the Maker, Ahura Mazda. 84. who see one another's soul, thinking of good thoughts, thinking of good words, thinking of good deeds, thinking of Garo Namana, and whose ways are shining as they go down towards the libations. And one of the things going on with this is we've got Spenta Ma'inyu. And that is contrary to Ingra Ma'inyu. And he's known as Spanog Manog, the Holy Spirit, the just man, and then we have the opposite. But among creation, there's a duality, and a pair of the good against evil is the way it's thought of. So, rather than Zervanism, if we just think of what's going on, it becomes more, it becomes easier to understand. But certainly it was interpreted as, there was like a god of time, and then that god of time created God of Satan, and yeah. So that was something that people believed, but that was an afterthought. Continuing the commentary of the Sirozahs Hadokat. He teaches the law to the three saviors to come, Oshadar Bami, Oshadar Ma, and Sashyos. Pares Taska, Mravaya Aska may be corrected according to the various readings. Into Starataska Maveya Aska, or something like it. The two genie here alluded to are Anna Stareta and Amu Yamna, sinless and innocent. Now, intelligence is of yes, but it doesn't correspond to jinn. It doesn't correspond to the maybe a good fire being. Da'eva would be a bad fire being, but who are invoked in company with Axte Hamva'inte in the Visperod, chapter 8:4. And so let's figure out exactly which. Okay, we are talking about this to withstand Eshma, the demon of wrath, which is the angel of obedience is against him. So, we're talking verses 14 and 15 here. And the Sirozahs are mentioned in verse 17. The faithful help through their good deeds in their work of final restoration to be performed by Sa'oshat. The first sacrifice is the Yasts sacrifice. The next, superior is a literal translation, is the Visperod. The middle sacrifice is the Hadokt and Avak Homast. The highest sacrifice is the Devazda Homast. And that's according to the Pothliff commentary. And I did a program on the Purushma Deva, and if you don't take some of the terms literally, that's how it breaks towards the higher sacrifice. But Sirozah is called the first, the next, the middle, the highest, according as he presides over one or the other of those sacrifices for a definition of the Avak Homast and Devazda Homast. And we can look elsewhere. And so we're talking verse 18 here. But the moments, Vispan is translated Harvisp Zaman. And then we talk about all the smitings, which is a pretty cool phrase. The heavy blows, yeah. All the smitings would be a cooler way to say that in verse 19. And Arste is the same as Arstat. And then the faithful man will receive alms. The Asho Dod. And we have somebody who sacrifices so again, we're having a person, they sacrifice to Sirozahs. And then we go on to the commentary of Farvardin Yast. Varo seems to be the Var Nirong, or ordeal, which is alluded to in several passages of the Avesta. According to the Dinkart, there were 33 kinds of Var ordeals. In Indo-Aryan culture, they had 33 sacred things that they brought to remembrance, and there'd be an intelligence or an angel, or depending on how you and some people would treat like there'd be a god of each of these things, or maybe each of these things was a god to them. But the most common was to pour melted copper upon the breast of the man whose truth was to be tested. If he went off uninjured, which would never happen, he was considered to have spoken the truth. Between the earth and the region of the infinite light, there are considered to be 3 intermediate regions: the star region, the moon region, and the sun region. And if you listen to fairy tales, that's one of the things going on there. The star region is the nearest to the earth, the sun region is the remotest from it. The Ardvasura has her seat in the star region. And in the comment on verse 3, we invoke and we bless. It's thought that the text is corrupt and might literally read, we invoke, we bless. Haramazda, okay. And then we have what's possibly a reference to waters. And the comment proper of the Russian Yast, which is seen as 12, but hold on a second, I'm going to go back here. And based on around a biblical passage where, they talk about the person being taken up to the third heaven, in the Doctrine and Covenants of the Latter-day Saints, they talk about 3 kingdoms: terrestrial, telestial, and celestial kingdom. And James Darmesteter can't make anything of the rest of the sentence. Havana Tanasis. And we go on to the commentary of the Tree of the Eagle, verse 17, which is part 10. The Sa'ana. In later mythology, the Sin Ambru are Simurg, the 30 birds of the conference of birds in the Sufi things. His resting place is on the tree, which is Jad Besh, opposed to Parm, of all seeds. And when he rises aloft, 1,000 twigs will shoot forth from that tree. And when he lights, he will break off the 1,000 twigs, and he sheds their seed therefrom. And the bird Chun Mrosh forever sits in that vicinity, and his work is this, that he collects that seed which sheds from the tree of all seeds, which is Jad Besh, and conveys it in there where Tishtar seizes the water, so that Tishtar may seize the water with that seed of all kinds, and it may rain on it, the world with the rain. Now, this is a simplification of the spreading of things, and perhaps a nicer touch of that sort of thing, like the Quran saying Jesus eats food, and that's that sort of thing, rather than saying, well, he goes to the bathroom and all that stuff, which is what we would probably say, and not mentioning that that's what's going on with the bird, and while it's flying about spreading the seed, we don't say, well, it's going to the bathroom and all sorts of stuff that maybe we don't want to talk about, but so. The Abbas of the Ranga. So, we're talking about the floods. And the marshy country at the mouth of the Tigris, just like what happened with the Nile, certain floods were required for certain farming to take place. The Abbas and Sanaka may refer to the southern and northern basin of the Tigris. And some may read Vispo, but MM in verse 24. The deep precipices. And then we go on. The star of water. And the star of water is mentioned, the seed of waters in the 846, which explains a narration in Kafi that we're talking about, rather than, this cosmological misunderstanding. It was just a way of speaking amongst the Persians. The star of water, essence is for the increase of water, and the star of earth, essence for the increase of earth, and the star of tree essences for the increase of trees, and the star of cattle essence for the increase of cattle, and the essence of water and earth and trees and cattle is created for the increase of man. But when we talk about all this, we are excluding the trees the planets which belong to Ahriman. In Al-Kafi, as I was saying, that big hadith collection, 15,000 something narrations, it was not per se that the planets belong to the devil, it's that perhaps spirits come in, because he was, I forget who the imam was supposed to be, he was being asked, is astrology true? I was like, well, it really is astrology. And so, but mainly he was doing away with the predicting of character and the future and that sort of stuff. But so this intelligence of Jupiter came down and taught a particular person, And then the particular person figured out, oh, I know who you are now. You're such and such. And then the spirit made us shriek and, all that stuff. But in the Yazidi, the misassociation with God, this fate is determined by the positions of the planets and the stars, and that sort of thing, and other things that people say about astrology that's outside of what monotheism teaches. This is why the planets are considered to be part of Ahriman, because the things that move about the stars, the things in this solar system basically were in that respect, and also because Sirius doesn't rotate. Sirius, it's the same time of year, so the Sirius system, kind of stay down here in the year when everything else would rotate a degree every 72 years. So certain mythologies would be different with that too. Maybe the Medusa head blinking, and because one star would pass in front of another and it would create a little like blink sort of thing. The star didn't really blink, but you know what I mean. The highest heaven, the highest heaven would be the sole abode of God. And Gauro Damana, much like in the when we talk about the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam and that sort of stuff, there's the talk of, well, you worship and you worship, you worship, you go to here, but if you worship, if God is your God, maybe the implication was that only God is worshipped, then you go to the Krishna Loka, it's the word they use there. Upa Havana Tanasus is part of the invocation art, something in verse 38 of the Russian Yast. The so-called Pa o Irio Takaesha, the primitive law, is what is considered as the true Mazayasnian religion in all ages, both before and after the time of Zarathustra. And thus we end the comment on the Russian Yast and move on to the comment on the Farvardin Yast. And another thing Al-Kafi brings up is the Bada of the messengers. It's every messenger brings a change in the system, but it's not in the messengership itself. It's certain laws for the time. There's a primitive law, and then there's the specific law of a particular nation. So reading Ma'enyu Tasto, and in the paragraph, Van Ganem Ma'enyu Tastem, regarding the bird. 3, and the Farvardin Yast, the mention of the heavenly substance. And there's said to be a division of the earth, in verse 3, the 3 divisions of the earth, different from and older than the division into 7 Kashvaras. This division was derived by analogy from the tripartite division of the universe, earth, atmosphere, and heaven. But also a lot of Persian mythologies divided the, they didn't have southern hemisphere. They had tropics, northern region and southern region, because each of those gave different views of the stars. And we have the reference to the 5 classes of animals: those living in the waters, upapa, those living under the ground, upasma, or upazema, the flying ones, fraptargat, the running ones, raves karant, the grazing ones, kan gran gak. The representatives of those several classes are the car, mahi fish, the ermine, the carsipet, the hare, and the donkey, the goat. And one of the things that we see with some of these things is the language is a lot broader. So we're going to see one of those things mentioned, and we're like, oh, that's such a limited view, that doesn't apply. And it's like, it turns out if you look at the words, they apply. Now, I'm not saying that everything, that even if it was correctly preserved here, we're on to 84. Verse 11. The last bit, we're talking about developing the bones, the hair, and the whatever a derevda is. And of course, if it's supposed to be the guidance for whatever time, the language can't be lost. That doesn't make any sense. And we go ahead, the assemblies and meetings of verse 16. A po imhan laon. So we're throwing in Latin terms. Of course, we have Greek sources talking about what the Zoroastrian tradition may leave out. A person who learns well is one who has the Gaasho Sruta Kratu. And somebody who wishes for wisdom, or the Kratukata, long A, second to last A, is the same as Kratukina. And, so we talk about people grounded in the knowledge of the various religious traditions. It's, okay, you memorize the text. Or you can at least refer to what the text actually says in its original language, or the meaning thereof. But then there's the further understanding. But it starts at its base. These people pretending, I can just jump to Hermetics, I can ignore anything prosaic, and it's like, well, prosaic is a level that you start with, right? And so, Gautama, the heretic, is mentioned later in that verse 16. Yo ma'id yango ga tamahe paro ayau parstoet avaete. It seems to be an allusion to controversies with the Buddhists or Gautama's disciples, whose religion had obtained a foothold in the western parts of Iran as early as the 2nd century before Christ. Na id yango. It may be lo instead of, or la instead of the, but it means a heretic. And Ashima Agba. And Fre Vretau is Fre Rete, or Far Namisen Adessa. And let's shoot ahead and figure out which verse we're talking about. 76. So we're talking about verse 25. And the faithful man not being ill-treated. So if somebody needs alms, and the Ashodad, or the alms becomes a cause of reminding, then that's obviously not something that's to be done. But we see that some of these traditions change with exposure to things. Like, for example, after a while of Jewish of exposure to the Jews, certain things happened in the Islamic community. Some of the narrations and stuff stayed the same, but tafsir and stuff, some of that changed. Now, some of it was because there was like information, whatever, but some of it's just, they responding to a different culture. And then, of course, there's different material cultures, but certainly people were looking at, say, well, the Buddhists and the Christians, and we got to change our response to this. And the Christians were saying, we don't worship the cross, well, we don't worship the fire. But they, the people saying we don't worship the fire, making a better argument and actually explaining it that way. Because the fire wasn't like the god in itself; it was like the means. But the Christians would think their crucifixes and stuff would have particular powers rather than being tools. And so, the weapons and the arms of verse 26 are, defensive. Woe to the person who fights wars for mere conquest, mere conversion, mere getting slaves, mere, this is what I believe. And, causing the foes to flee, of course. And then there's the comparison to horses. The loud snorting doesn't mean it's literal, and some things it's accomplished